we cannot save the world, we will damn sure avenge it. Those words rang true in Mr. Stark's head after he single-handedly saved the world. But that was 6 months ago, and those words remained in Tony's head. A lot can change in 6 months, but also a lot can stay the same. After the Avengers defeated the evil Thanos, there wasn't a lot to do. Thanos had apologized to the Avengers and told them all I ever wanted was some friends, and that his life and his evil ways had been changed through the power of friendship. The Avengers, being force of good that they were, immediately forgave him, on one condition, that he turned everything back to normal, which he agreed. Tony gave him a job as a secretary, but he never anticipated that he would become a sexy secretary. A sexy secretary, those words sounded so weird in his head. Tony thought to himself, which was weird because he was literally thinking about a thought. I think that it might be thought deception. A sexy secretary. Those words sounded so weird, but they certainly were true. Thanos was a very, very sexy secretary, though he wouldn't admit it to himself. Tony found himself getting aroused every time Thanos would walk into the room. It didn't help that Thanos always came to work in that white shirt that hugged his frame and the black skirt that showed off his never-ending legs. Tony didn't know much about love. He grew up in a strict household where emotions were not permitted, although he knew that he longed for him. As time went by, Tony thought those feelings would change. He thought that he would be able to move on and pretend like it never happened. But as time went on, Tony found that Thanos was seeking glances at him through the huge wall of glass that would often separate them, and the feelings that he thought would leave him only strengthened. I must keep things professional. What would Pepper think? My wife, he thought. How love could be so cruel. Things only got harder with time. Thanos stayed in work later to get ahead on some paperwork. Thanos said. Tony knew this was a lie, but for some reason he didn't mind. One night, when they were alone by the photocopier, Thanos asked him a weird question. Tony? Thanos asked, unsure of himself. Do you believe in love? Oh, for God's sake, Tony replied dismissively. I'm married. Tony replied in a way that was more to convince himself than anyone else. I know, Tony. Thanos responded yearningly. But what if I wasn't in love with you? But in love with Iron Man? Tony took a second to respond, taking his time to consider things, and Tony was always very considered. I never thought of it, Tony said after much deliberation. He'd always thought of himself as Iron Man, but he never considered the idea of Iron Man and him being two different identities. But I am Iron Man, Tony said defensively. I know you're Iron Man, but is Iron Man you? Thanos pleaded. Maybe you should stop thinking with your head and start thinking with your heart. What would Iron Man want? You need to stop holding you back. After all you've done for you, I do not know what you mean, Tony replied, though that was a lie. Suddenly it all started to make sense. Tony, I think you do, Thanos responded, his hand pressing play on a cassette player that Star-Lord left lying around. As the yearning saxophone of George Michael's Careless Whisper started to play, Thanos started to unbutton his shirt. Thanos, what are you doing? Tony said, his mind saying no but his body saying yes. Shh, don't think, Tony. Just put on the suit. Just do what the suit tells you, Tony acquiesced. A look of excitement grew on Thanos' face as the suit melded himself with Tony. It was a look of excitement that Tony matched, though it couldn't be seen underneath his metal helmet. Tony, it's okay. There's nothing to worry about. Just do what comes natural. Tony slowly pulled up Thanos' skirt and admired Thanos' beautiful legs. Tony was met with Thanos' huge traveling 12-inch erection. How would it all fit in Tony, thought. a little worried. It has to fit, though. I am Iron Man, he said defiantly. Tony always loved the challenge. He took off his helmet and took Thanos' penis determinedly into his mouth. A musky smell dispensed itself throughout the room. He could taste it, but he didn't care. The up and down movement of Tony's head matched the beat of Carol's whisper. Thanos moaned in pleasure. Thor could oh God. Thor couldn't suck dick like this, Thanos declared. This declaration encouraging Tony to push himself harder, to suck dick better. As Thanos moaned, Tony could feel his heart racing. He now had the courage to do something really daring. As Tony was sucking Thanos' cock, his mind flashed back to when they fought in Titan. You are not the only one cursed with knowledge. What did that mean? It was a question that had burned itself into Tony's brain ever since that fateful night. Tonight he was going to find out. Tony stopped sucking and lifted his head from Thanos' engorged penis. What did you mean? Tony asked, his voice pleading with the desire for knowledge. I don't understand, Tony, Thanos replied, perplexed. When you told me I weren't the only one cursed with knowledge, questioned Tony. Let me show you, Tony, said Thanos. Bend over, demanded Thanos. Thanos, still erect, rammed his massive engorged penis through Tony's arm and right into his anus. Impossible, Tony yelled with a mixture of disbelief and pleasure. How could Thanos' penis pierce through Tony's armor? Knowledge. That's how I did it. Knowledge, Thanos whispered. By the time Careless Whisper had replaced Toto's Africa, the song was perfect for the thrusting of Thanos. As the song reached its climax, so did Thanos, covering Tony's suit, which seemed so warm. Tony could feel it through his suit. Now it's my turn, Tony. Knowledge declared Thanos as he bent over. Jarvis, how much power do I have left in this suit? Asked Tony. 10%. Tony said. Jarvis, unsure of himself. Can we deploy the iron penis? Questioned Tony. No, Tony, it's too risky. It's too difficult to control. What if? Jarvis said worryingly. But Tony always loved the challenge. Just then, Tony's wife, all the Avengers, the Guardians of the Galaxy, and Happy entered the room. They all looked shocked and horrified. Well, that was unexpected, said Rocket. A huge silence hung over the room. I am Groot, Groot said with an excited smile on his face. The end.